At my father's wedding, I spotted my name placed at the very last table on the far end of the reception hall, surrounded by great aunts I barely remembered, and third cousins from my stepmom's side who once called me the quiet one with the weird bangs. My name wasn't even printed properly, just scribbled in pen next to a centerpiece of dying carnations. I stood there for a second thinking surely this had to be a mix-up. Then I heard her voice. Well, we had to prioritize Veronica, my stepmother said with that signature sugary tone she uses when she's about to say something cruel, but wants it to sound diplomatic. She held a glass of white wine like a prop in some TV drama, and smiled with so much smugness it almost seemed rehearsed. My eyes shifted across the room. There at the main table sat my dad smiling radiant and proud next to Veronica, with her son Parker right beside him. Parker, the golden boy with the MBA and a jawline made for magazine covers, laughed along with Dad's business partners like he belonged there more than I ever could. My name was nowhere near theirs. I looked at my dad, waiting for him to notice, to speak up, to say anything. But he was in mid-conversation, animated and distracted, waving his hands like he was making some important point. When he did glance at me, it was brief, like noticing the waiter was out of ice water, not recognition, not regret, not even surprise. That glance told me everything I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't considered. I wasn't even remembered. So I smoothed out my navy dress, took a long breath, and walked toward the exit. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't throw my heels across the dance floor. I just said quietly, loud enough for only Veronica to hear, "Thanks for making it so easy." Then I left, heels clicking against the polished wood like a drumbeat of finality. I walked straight to my car, the late September breeze sweeping around my shoulders like a quiet witness. The air smelled like autumn burnt leaves, soft smoke, and overwatered grass. The reception music faded behind me, muffled by the shut doors, and my own heartbeat steady and strangely calm. My heels clicked softly on the pavement, and I remember being surprised, shocked even, that my hands weren't shaking. For years I had pictured this moment. I imagined it would come with tears, with some explosive argument, or a trembling voice demanding answers. Instead, I just felt done. Not hurt, not angry, just done. I climbed into the driver's seat and shut the door. The silence inside the car was total. No music, no chatter, no drunk cousins taking selfies or yelling over centerpieces, just the hum of the air conditioner and the soft buzz of the overhead lights in the parking lot. I sat there for a long time, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield. Half of me expected my phone to light up. Maybe Dad would notice I'd left. Maybe Aunt Susan would call, whispering, "Where did you go?" Maybe Veronica would send some fake cheerful message with a kissy emoji at the end, pretending this was all some hilarious misunderstanding. But nothing came. They were still inside laughing, toasting, dancing while I was out here, and no one had noticed, no one cared. And that was the moment I let it go. It wasn't sadness that washed over me, it was clarity. Years of feeling like an afterthought, of wondering if I was imagining the indifference, the dismissals, the silence. Years of twisting myself into knots, trying to win approval that was never coming. It was all real. They had shown me exactly where I stood, and for the first time I believed them. So I started the engine. And with each mile I put between me and that reception hall, the weight I'd carried for decades lifted just a little more. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into the steering wheel. I just drove, breathing like someone who had finally stepped out of a locked room. Truth is, I had been preparing for this moment for years. Maybe not deliberately, but somewhere deep in my bones, I always knew something like this was coming. My dad and I had been drifting apart long before Veronica, long before Parker walked into our lives like a sponsored LinkedIn post in human form. The divide had started much earlier with one decision: my career. Growing up, I was the kid with straight A's and color-coded folders. Everyone assumed I'd go into law or finance, something with prestige, something that could be bragged about at cocktail parties and company galas. My dad, Grant, made it pretty clear that success had a very narrow definition: money, titles, power. It wasn't enough to be smart. You had to be profitable. So when I told him at 17 that I wanted to become a nurse, I might as well have said I was planning to join a circus. He didn't yell, he didn't even argue. He just let out a breath, long, slow, disappointed. "You're going to burn yourself out for barely any pay," he said. "Why not aim higher? Be a doctor, a surgeon, something that actually matters." I told him I wanted to help people. He said, "You can help people and still be respected." That was the beginning of the quiet rejection. After that, he never asked about my classes, never celebrated when I passed my boards, never visited me during my residency shifts, even when I worked 14-hour days on trauma floors in downtown Portland. But when Parker opened a real estate investment firm 3 years ago, Dad poured in capital. When Parker made his first 6 figures, Dad threw a dinner party. Parker was building something. I was just working. When I needed support, I got self-help quotes and unsolicited advice. When Parker needed anything, he got checks. Still, I kept showing up. I checked Dad's blood pressure when it started climbing. I coordinated post-op care after his knee surgery. I handled the prescriptions, the doctors, the follow-ups quietly without asking for credit. Each time I told myself, he's still my dad. That has to count for something. But that day at the wedding, sitting in my car, I realized maybe it didn't. And for once, I was at peace with that. That night, I expected something: a ping, a voicemail, a message that said, "Where did you go?" or "Can we talk?" Anything that resembled a ripple of concern, but my phone remained blank, still silent, like the entire wedding went off perfectly fine without me. Apparently it had. I got home, kicked off my heels, and ordered Thai food. Shrimp pad see ew, extra spicy, my comfort meal. I curled up on the couch in my scrubs turned evening wear, scrolled through social media like it was any other Saturday night. And to my surprise, I felt fine. Not broken, not bitter, just quietly done. The next morning, my screen finally lit up. The first text was from Aunt Denise. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" There it was, the soft, guilt-sprinkled concern from someone who noticed. I didn't respond. Then a cousin from Albuquerque chimed in, "Everything all right? Saw you dip early." Again, silence from me. And then came the message I had expected and dreaded the most. From Dad: "We need to talk." Not "I'm sorry," not "let's fix this," just an instruction. It landed like a stone, cold, heavy, unmoving. I left it on read. For the next few days, I kept waiting for guilt to sneak up on me like it always had before. That little voice that whispered, "Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe they didn't mean it like that." But it never came. No tape replayed in my head, no mental gymnastics, just clean, steady silence. I went to work. I took on back-to-back night shifts at the hospital. I had brunch with my best friend Candace, who toasted me with mimosas and said, "About damn time you chose you." For the first time in years, I wasn't asking myself what I'd done wrong. I wasn't reanalyzing Dad's tone or Veronica's phrasing. I wasn't second-guessing my feelings or doubting my place. I had stopped searching for approval that was never going to come. And the freedom in that, it was louder than any apology. It was a Thursday afternoon when Aunt Denise called again. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail anyway. "Sweetie, you need to talk to your dad. He's at St. Joseph's. Nothing serious, just he needs some help." The words were delivered casually, like she was asking me to grab milk on the way home. There was no mention of regret, no whisper of reconciliation. Just he needs help, as if that was reason enough. And I should have seen it coming. Turns out Dad had ignored his blood pressure for too long again. Some complications with his meds, stress may be karma. In the past, I would have been the one tracking his symptoms. I would have reminded him to refill his prescription, called Dr. Keller's office, logged his readings. But this time I wasn't there, and suddenly, it mattered. Linda tried calling too. I let it ring. Then Parker. That one surprised me, but I ignored his call just as quickly. Later that night, Aunt Denise texted, "Look, I know you're mad, but your dad's not doing well." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" I texted back. She replied, "You know how he is. He doesn't mean things the way they sound." I let out a slow breath and typed, "Let's test that." What did he mean when he said nursing was the lowest option? When he put me at table 14 behind people I barely know? When he called me dramatic for choosing boundaries? Silence, because she didn't have an answer, because there wasn't one. Everything he said he meant. Every time he undermined me. Every time he celebrated Parker and ignored me. Every time he made me feel like I was just the kid who picked the wrong life. Now he needed me, but not to say sorry, not to apologize, just to resume the unpaid labor I used to provide. And this time I wasn't coming. A week after Dad was discharged, I got another text, this time from Linda. "I think we should put the past behind us." I nearly choked on my coffee. Put the past behind us, like I was supposed to forget the cousin table seating arrangement. Like her syrupy smile and casual cruelty could just be deleted. Her next message came minutes later. "Your dad is struggling. This is a family matter." Family, that word again, always weaponized when it was convenient. Funny how family only seemed to matter when someone needed something. So I called her. For once, I wanted to hear it from her own voice. "Linda," I said, calm and measured, "am I family now? Because a few weeks ago, I was table 14, buried behind your niece's fiancé's dog walker." Silence. "Which is it?" I asked. "Am I family or a placeholder you circle back to when the bills stack up?" "That's not fair," she replied. I smiled, sharp as glass. "Neither was your seating chart." Then I hung up. After that, the calls stopped temporarily. For a while, I believed maybe they'd figured it out. Maybe Dad finally accepted that I wasn't going to be his default nurse anymore. That if he wanted care, he'd have to pay for it just like everyone else. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. And I was right. Because 2 weeks later, Linda walked into my workplace. It was a slow day at the clinic. I had just finished charting patient notes when I heard her voice at reception. "I'm here to see my stepdaughter. It's urgent." I closed my eyes, drew a long breath, and stepped into the hallway. "What are you doing here?" I asked, arms folded. She smiled tight and practiced. "We need to talk." "We already did," I said, "on the phone, remember?" "It's about your father." I held up my hand. "No, you don't get to bring him up like that changes anything." She faltered. "He's getting worse. We can't afford full-time care." "Should have prioritized better," I said. Her eyes flickered. She heard it. She remembered. "This isn't the time for grudges," she insisted. I tilted my head. "Really, was it a grudge when you placed me at the back of the room?" You owe him, she hissed, then voice low, suddenly stripped of pretense. I pulled my wrist from her grip and stepped back. No, I said, I don't. And I turned away without a single glance back. I thought that would be the last of it. It wasn't. A week later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. But something tugged at me, curiosity maybe, or some part of me still too soft. I called back. Hey, came Dad's voice, hesitant. I leaned against the kitchen counter. What do you want? He exhaled. Linda said she spoke to you. She did, I said flatly. Pause. I think we should talk. In person. I almost laughed. Oh, now you want to see me. He ignored that. Come by the house. We'll have dinner, just us. I checked the clock like that mattered. You know, I said slowly, a year ago, I would have been thrilled to hear you say that. Another pause. But we both know this isn't about dinner. Still against my better judgment, I went. The next night I pulled into the driveway I used to know like my own skin. The porch light was still the same yellow glow. The wind chimes still hung crooked by the front window. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Dad was already seated when I walked in. Takeout cartons lined the table he hadn't cooked. Of course not. We ate in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was empty. Then he finally spoke. So, how's work? I raised an eyebrow. You don't care about my job, Dad. He flinched. That's not true. Really? Because last time we talked about it, you said I'd settle into mediocrity. He rubbed his forehead. Look, I didn't bring you here to fight. Then why am I here? Silence. Then he looked up. I need your help. There it was. I set my fork down. You mean free medical care? I wouldn't put it like that. How would you put it? I just thought, since you know all this stuff, maybe you could help. Save us money. I stared at him. You know what's funny, I said. That's exactly what I used to think every time I looked after you, scheduled your doctor visits, reminded you to take your meds. I thought, why is he making this so hard? His expression tightened. That's not fair. I gestured around. No. Where was this concern at the wedding when Linda parked me behind the centerpieces? He had no answer. I leaned forward. You don't want a daughter. You want a nurse who won't send an invoice. That's not true. Then what do you want, Dad? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because he didn't have an answer. That was the last time I saw him. He texted a few more times in the following weeks, short messages stripped of apology or emotion. Just checking in, call me when you can, we should talk. I ignored every one of them. Then the messages stopped. A few months later, my cousin Jason reached out. Your dad finally hired a nurse, he said. Hourly, the cheapest he could find. I didn't ask for details, didn't ask what kind of care Dad was getting, didn't ask if Linda helped. I already knew she didn't. Didn't ask if Ethan was around, he wasn't. I was exactly where I wanted to be out of their orbit. 1 year passed. I was sitting in the break room at the hospital when the news segment came on, a glowing piece on Ethan's startup broadcast across every screen in the building. There he was sitting in a glass-walled corner office, flashing his signature grin to the camera. He was talking about expansion, international partnerships, record-breaking investments. I stared at the screen. This man, my father's chosen son, couldn't even spare a dime to help the man who gave him everything. And Dad, he had chosen that son. Chosen to invest in him, chosen to cheer for him, chosen to build his legacy through him. And now he was alone, living in a rundown care facility that barely passed state inspections, while Ethan thrived. While I thrived. Because in my own way, I had won. Not out of vengeance, not out of bitterness. I had built a life, a real one rooted in value, not validation. I had friends who actually listened, patients who were grateful, a job that mattered, a home that was mine. And for the first time, I could look back at the damage and not feel like I owed anyone anything for surviving it. My father's life was built on favoritism and blind ambition. Mine was built on empathy and perseverance. He had made his choices, and he was now living the consequences of them. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was free. It was nearly 2 years later when I received the final message. A number I didn't recognize, short, blunt. Your father passed away last night. Thought you should know. I stared at the screen for a long time. No tears came, no wave of sorrow, no shock, no peace. Just nothing. A hollow sort of stillness that told me everything I needed to know. I typed back, "Thanks for letting me know," and I put my phone down. I had no desire to ask where or when, no urge to ask who was with him, no impulse to ask if he suffered or if he said my name. None of that mattered anymore, because I had already said goodbye long before his heart stopped beating. I said goodbye the day I walked away from that wedding, the day he let me sit in the back beside strangers and said nothing. The day he let Linda smile and say we had to prioritize without blinking. I said goodbye the night I ignored his first plea for help, and every time he reached out, not with regret, but with expectation. I had let go of needing to be seen, to be chosen, to be enough for someone who never tried to understand me. And in that space where grief might have lived, there was something better. Peace. I had built a life beyond his gaze. I had patients who called me their lifeline, friends who checked in because they wanted to, not because they needed something. Sunrises I watched without waiting for approval, a future I owned completely. He died with the legacy he had built: a fractured family, a forgotten daughter, a son too busy counting profits to count memories. But I lived on with clarity. Not every daughter mourns her father. Some simply exhale. And that too is a kind of love, the kind you give to yourself when no one else did. So no, I didn't go too far. I went just far enough to finally be free.